The Zhiyun Crane M2, this little guy. Plenty of reviews have already been made on this small, compact, lightweight gimbal, but I wanted to take a slightly different approach and actually try something new here. If throughout this video you're interested at all in getting the Crane M2, you can actually save 15% using the affiliate coupon code down below. So the only specs that I'm interested in for this gimbal are its weight load. It's rated at 130 grams to 720 grams. That makes it actually pretty versatile. It means it's good for smartphones, action cameras, and a lot of point and shoot cameras, as well as some smaller mirrorless cameras, but I started thinking, how well does it work with a much larger setup? We're gonna go ahead and test it out. If you're interested in other value-focused camera, tech, and gear-related videos, be sure to subscribe to the channel where I have a lot more content like that, as well as a lot of videos coming up for some new gear purchases that I recently made that I think you guys are going to be super interested in checking out and possibly adding to your own kit setup. A few years ago, I actually had, prior to getting this, the Crane M2, the original Crane M. That's actually how I got a lot of the cinematics on my channel started. I was using the Crane M with my original Sony a6300, and I was using their kit lens, as well as the 50mm f1.8 with it. And I made a lot of cool videos. That's what really got me interested in cinematics, cinematography. I was pretty pleased with how that combo worked out, but it did have some limitations. I ended up actually selling that gimbal maybe about a year or so ago. Compared to this, it was a lot less portable and just felt more clunky, it felt heavier, and overall it just wasn't as easy to pack up and travel with. Compared to its predecessor, the M2 is a lot lighter and it's just easier to fold up when you don't use it, as well as set up when you're ready to use it. The first thing you'll notice is a removable extended handle, as well as feet. The original M didn't have this, which meant that you would always have to put it on a tripod or get this as an extended foot as a separate purchase. The fact that it's included right now is actually pretty cool. That's the size of my hand right there. Just right off the bat, you can just see how small this thing is. The other thing compared to the original M that this now has, our axes aren't moving. We have two locking buttons here. This keeps that from rotating. Then we just slide that. And then when it comes around, it'll prevent that from rotating anymore. And then we have this little turn screw here. This allows us to slide that up and down. You go ahead and tighten that, pretty snug. With my original Crane M, I disliked how it would just rotate and just flop around even as best as I packed it. You can see how I have the Crane M2 in the center portion of my backpack. I had a similar way of putting the original Crane M. However, that wouldn't always keep the axes from rotating around unwanted. Compared to the Crane M2, it took a lot more time to set up and balance each time I wanted to use it. The reason being, when you loosen everything up, the Crane M2 has now added these quick setting locks here, allowing you to save where it was last balanced properly. And you don't have to try to rebalance everything. You just know that at that point, that's where it was balanced, so you just have to slide to the end there. While the quick release plate doesn't have something like that, it does have measurements down there so you can remember, oh, it was at this measurement point. Or you can just keep it locked in place and not adjust it, and next time you go to unpack it, it's just gonna still be in the same spot. Likewise, this axis point doesn't have anything to help you remember where you saved it except for the measurements on the side. But again, you actually don't need to loosen this because it still tightens down really well. So those characteristics altogether make this a far superior gimbal. While its weight load hasn't really changed too much from its predecessor, the fact that it's just more compact and easy to use makes you more likely to want to carry this around and use it as a tool, and you're less encumbered. The thing's only 1 pound, so it's pretty light. And now, because it's so compact, you can do this. I've actually found myself putting this in my pocket a couple times where I just needed to quickly hold on to it somewhere as I was walking around or moving locations to set up somewhere else. It's actually smaller and more compact than some phone-only gimbals that I've had in the past. And so it's actually a really good gimbal for smaller camera setups, and it's extremely versatile and you can get some great shots with it. But like the question at the beginning of this video, how does it fare with much larger setups? As you guys know, I came from the Sony a6300, I recently had the X-T30, I sold that and I bought the X-H1. It's a pretty big and beefy camera, even with smaller lenses like the kit lens or the 35mm, which we're shooting on now. This was not bought for the X-H1. This was actually bought for a second B camera, which I recently got. I'm going to reveal that camera later on this video and talk a little bit about it with a more in-depth review in a future video of it. So of course, in no way is it a complete replacement for a dedicated gimbal for larger cameras like the X-H1 and other similarly sized and heavy cameras with bigger lenses and things like that. But is the M2 able to get somewhat decent footage with the larger X-H1 one is all you got. Weighing in at 673 grams with the battery installed, the X-H1 is much larger than smaller mirrorless cameras. Add the kit length, which is another 135 grams, we're at a total of 808 grams for our setup, which is 88 grams over the max payload of the M2, which is about 12% more than it's rated for. Without any additional mods or tools, is it going to be able to hold up the X-H1 and get anything usable out of it? You're probably thinking this is an impractical or dumb test and you don't really learn anything from it. And I thought the same thing at first too, until I actually got these shots. These B-roll shots of the X-H1 on the M2 may have surprised you. Have no additional warp stabilization or editing done to them, but it does have IBIS from the X-H1 enabled. If you've used a gimbal before and you're familiar with how balancing works, you're adjusting all the axes on your gimbal to essentially make the camera with its lens, in a sense, weightless. So anywhere you rotate the camera, it just essentially stays completely still in that spot wherever you let go or push it to. The better and more precise you balance it, the less strain there is going to be on the actual motors of the gimbal, and it can actually operate and perform more smoothly. So here's how it looks like when it's actually balanced on my new B camera. This is the Fuji X-A3. It looks really similar to my old X-T30. It's older, it's more budget oriented, but as a B camera, it's all I really needed, and the fact that it can still use the same Fuji lenses that I use made it a really great choice and an excellent value, and I'll talk about it more in a future video. When balancing this on the M2 using either the 16-50, the 35mm, or the same 15-45mm that I have, the M2 is perfectly suited for smaller mirrorless setups like this. Certain movements are surprisingly good using the M2, the X-H1. Most of the shots that I would need with the gimbal are walking shots, panning vertically, panning horizontally, as well as a variety of joystick or phone-controlled movements, usually with the gimbal on a tripod or me hand-holding and using some joystick movements. A lot of these shots turned out pretty good, kind of exceeded my expectations for them. But of course, like we said, it's not going to be a complete replacement for an actual gimbal that's designed for heavier loads like that. But if the M2 is all you have, again, for whatever reason, in a pinch, you can actually get some really great shots with it if you know the limitations of the M2 with the gear that you're using. So those shots were pretty good, but here's the reality. There are movements that will frequently cause the gimbal to poop out. Bad, right? But kind of expected. These little motors here are being overworked. When you have a certain movement, either sudden or too far past what it can hold, if you have your camera leaning too far that way, it's not going to be able to hold it, it's just going to drop out. That's why these larger gimbals that are made for heavier cameras are just so much bigger. They need to have motors that are stronger. So when we look at the shots that cause the gimbal to overload, we've pushed it too far in one direction. However, when we keep it fairly level and hardly or slowly push it in one axis direction or another, it holds up well. If you know the limitation that if you push it anywhere past 30 degrees or if you move it faster than this, it's going to give out, you can work around those limitations when you need to. I found that either keeping the gimbal in pan, follow, or lock mode give you the best results, as well as avoiding any faster jerky movements with it at all. Even to my surprise, slower rolling shots worked well too, to a certain degree. There are sensors that are telling the gimbal what's upright and what's level in here. Even though the camera appears to be fully balanced on this gimbal, these motors are working so hard to maintain that sudden movements are just going to cause it to give out. Even with movements that it can handle, the reason this is only for when you're in a pinch is your motors are probably going to wear out far faster just for the fact that they're working way harder and for a much longer period of time. If you're constrained to only having a small gimbal like the M2, whether it's because you're you're trying to pack light for a trip, or because you primarily only use it for a smaller camera like the X-A3, or maybe it's just what you have right now on you for whatever reason. When you need it to, the M2 can help you get more stable and more cinematic shots, again keeping in mind its limitations. Since originally selling the first Crane M that I had about a year ago, I haven't really had a need or want to use gimbals so much with the kind of projects I've been doing. There are times when a gimbal would have been helpful, but I found ways to get around that. That said, since getting this Crane M2, as well as another larger and more capable gimbal for my X-H1, kind of re-sparked an interest. That said though, even with the choice between the two gimbals, one being the more capable one that's going to be able to handle anything with the X-H1, or this little teeny one, if I'm in a situation where I don't really know I need a gimbal, or I just want to have it for maybe 1 or 2 shots, I'm going to forego carrying the large, heavy, and bulky gimbal, which can do a lot, in favor of the teeny one for the more simple shots that are less important, but I still kind of want to have in case I need them. With its super compact size, its versatility, and simplicity, with the fact that it's easy and quick to set up, this is a really cool gimbal that a lot of people can easily add to their kit without breaking the bank, and the learning curve on it is pretty simple too. But from making this video, I've learned that the M2, for certain people like myself, can actually have a far wider use knowing its limitations. If it's all I have and I need it to, it's going to help me out even with the X-H1. Don't forget to check the affiliate code and link below if you're interested in getting an M2. You'll save 15% off your purchase and it helps the channel out. I think you'll be pleased with how convenient, easy to use, and fun this little thing can be. Thanks for checking out the video. Subscribe if you're new to the channel. Like the video if you found the content helpful. And if you're interested in checking out more value-focused gear reviews and kind of interesting tips as well, stay tuned because I have a lot more content coming out on some other gear purchases that I think you guys are going to love. Until the next one.